Good moonlit morning, everybody. If you want to get in a little bit of let's say a little bit of a creeped out mood, then please venture forth. Excellent. Now, I did this before. I've actually done pre-recordeds of this for a little while. It's kind of a popular little thing people do, but what you're going to get tonight is a live reading of a couple of scary stories. Now, this time is not as on the fly as the last time I did it a couple days ago. I didn't read any of the stories, but I already have two stories pre-picked. They're kind of a medium length. They're not, of course, they're short stories, but medium length for a short story. So that's why I'm only going to do two, because it's probably going to take a little while. But by the titles, they look like they're good. I also have a members only channel now. So what I'm thinking of doing is incorporating the readings of these short stories, be it live or pre-recorded. I'm going to incorporate that into exclusive stuff for the members only channel. Like, one thing I'm thinking of doing is like how, if anyone's up in here, how fortunate you are to catch this reading right now off the late night, 3-something a.m., right? Whereas anyone that catches the live stream, they'll be able to catch the reading of these. However, if you miss the live stream, you'll have to be a member to catch the replay. That's one way I'm thinking of doing it. So we're going to see. But, I might need to get my numbers up and leave it a free fall for anybody, be it live stream or replay. So I'm going to feel my way into it and work it out. You know what I mean? But either way, we're about to get it in. We got two joints tonight. Where we at? Let me get that thing. One is entitled, I Know Why We Shiver at the Sound of Nails on a Chalkboard. And the other, There's a Day Hidden Between the Days. That title is why I'm doing that second one. I looked at the length. I was like, it's a little too long, but I said, you know what? This title is just fire. So I decided to go with that. So yeah, I Know Why We Shiver at the Sound of Nails on a Chalkboard. That one has been posted by an N.S. Lewis. We also got a little addition to the situation. Check it out. Well, that was there before, but we also have some background music. So pardon me if I can't see the chat. I will check it in between the reading of this story and before I jump into the next one. So if anyone's up in here, shout out to y'all. Once again, I Know Why We Shiver at the Sound of Nails on a Chalkboard by N.S. Lewis. As it turns out, I never had an Uncle Sal. Yeah, I still remember him though. Pardon me. I never had an Uncle Sal. I still remember him though. Sitting down at certain family events with a drink always in his hand. How's it going, Uncle Sal? I'd ask, thinking he was just lonely and that talking to someone might cheer him up. I'm on the road to nowhere, Jack, he'd say. I never knew how to respond to that. Did I ever tell him that my name wasn't Jack? Or did I tell him that I was sorry for his wife, my aunt, that she had died? But that tomorrow was another day. In fact, today was another day. And we were all here having fun and eating good food together. And so there was a reason to feel happy, right? Of course, it wouldn't have mattered because he didn't exist. Always sitting there silently, sometimes deciding to validate the adequacy of the turkey dinner when pressed, and always telling me when I tried to cheer him up that he was on the road to nowhere. You are too, Jack, he'd say. The last that I or anybody saw of Uncle Sal was 22 years ago, on November 1st, early in the morning before the sun was even up. I was in the kitchen, rooting through the drawers to find out where my parents had hidden the last of the Halloween candy. Out of the silence, there was suddenly much ado at the front door, a rattling of the knob, followed by a series of bangs, and it spooked me for a moment as I recalled images of monsters in the dark from the night before, until a familiar voice called out, For Christ's sake, it's Sal, let me in. A moment later, my dad came into view from upstairs, stark naked, looking as angry as I'd ever seen him. He walked over, he pressed his hands against the door and shouted at Uncle Sal to go home and sleep it off, so help him. God, as he said. "Open the fucking door," said Uncle Sal in an even voice. "I've got something important to say, and I don't know how much time that I've got left." "Sleep it off," said Dad again. I was staring right at his hairy ass. It was gross, and I wondered if one day my own ass would grow as hairy. "If only I could," said Sal, so quietly that I could barely hear him. "Open the damn door, Don. I won't be but a minute." At last my dad relented, undid the lock, and swung the door open, still naked, his manhood retreating into him as the cold fall air rushed into our sanctuary. "This better be damn good, brother." "It's damn bad," said Sal, stepping inside and seeming somehow to darken our house. Then to me, "You might as well hear this too, Jack." "I'm not Jack," I said in a small voice. "Well, I'm not your Uncle Sal, and that's what I came here to say." My father's anger, I noticed, had not abated. "So you got a little high and had to share this great insight with us, huh? I tell you what, you're right. You're not part of this family. Not anymore. This has been the last straw. Barging in here like a maniac, you're nothing now." "That's the exact truth," said Sal sadly. "I heard a noise coming from my closet, and it sounded awful. It sounded like nails on a chalkboard, you know? It triggered a response inside of you. You could physically feel it sliding into your ears and entering your body, prodding your nerves and making you shiver." I found that I was suddenly shivering myself. "What was it?" I asked. "It's nonsense," said my dad. "And unless your former uncle vacates the property post haste, I'm calling the police to have him removed." When Sal made no move to leave, my father's hairy ass stalked into the kitchen where the phone was located. "I didn't know what it was at first," said Sal, now staring at the staircase, as if he expected something to come down at any moment. "I was too afraid to look. Didn't need anything from the closet anyway. Just a bunch of old memories in there, and dead suits that I had no use for. So I stayed right away. Spent a lot of time at the bar, and when I was drunk enough, I'd stumbled home and sleep on the couch. I could still hear it. No, I could still feel it. But it wasn't so bad when I was sloshed and downward from the hall from it." "But you did find out what it was?" I asked, both eager to know and afraid to know. I heard my father talking into the phone in the kitchen. "I did," said Sal, "because, well, it sounds ridiculous now, but I suppose that anything we do sounds ridiculous from the right distance. Well, anyway, one night I was there on the couch, my head swimming in liquor and my bank account dangerously dwindling, and I asked myself, what kind of a man are you, afraid of his own closet? And I resolved then that I would stop the noise with my own bare hands, because on the surface level I had to convince myself that it was all just some problem with the pipes behind the wall. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it at all. I could feel it in my cells and my atoms. And after I had foolishly gathered some tools from the garage, the feeling grew stronger with each step that I took toward my bedroom. With each decibel, that godforsaken noise, it increased. So too did my dread at facing it. My father returned to where we were standing by the door in front of the stairwell. "Police are on the way," he said. "I'm going to get dressed." "Stay a minute, Don. I'm just getting to the point. I was waiting for you. This is the last thing you'll ever hear from me, so another minute won't hurt." I could hear the bed on the floor above us creak, and my mother put her feet on the ground. She plodded off into the bathroom. "You've got 1 minute," said my dad, "if the police don't cut you off." Good, said my uncle. So there I was, tool bag in one hand and the doorknob in the other, ready to face whatever is in that closet. I was still shivering, on account of the sound, that is. Now the sound is a warning. Of what? I'm about to tell you, if I can cobble together the words. Sal paused and reached into his coat pocket for a cigarette. "You can't smoke in here," said my dad. "Arrest me then," said Sal, lighting up. Then he continued. "I opened the door and then I saw the source of the sound. It was coming from this crack, not a crack in the wall, a crack in what we think of as reality. And it was wide enough where I could see a little bit into it, into what's lying behind what I now understand to be the paper-thin veneer of our reality. And it was crystalline, this intricate, incomprehensible pattern of glimmering blue, many-faceted crystals. And then I leaned in to stick my head through the crack." Sal took a deep drag and he blew the smoke out slowly. My father was as angry as ever. "This is the most ridiculous nonsense I've ever heard. Even for you, Sal, this is a new pitch of insanity. Now I pity you, but the time has come to cut off all these ties we have." As I brought my head nearer and nearer, said Sal, the noise increased in intensity. I was no longer shivering, but now violently convulsing. My body was doing its damnedest to warn me, but I had to know what it was all about. And so, with my ears bleeding, I stuck my head into the crack. At once the terror stopped. So too did the pain. Now I was looking at reality as it really is, controlled by these cold blue crystals. I didn't know if there was a consciousness there, but there was something there. Something making it all happen. Something experimenting. Again, whether the experiments were deliberate or not was unclear. I felt a will. But if it was a will aimed at a specific purpose or not, whether it was, that is, I don't know. Your minute is up, said my dad. Just in time, because that's the end of the story. What I discovered is that I don't exist. Not really, never have. Thus concluding, Sal flicked his cigarette butt onto the floor, which was still standing wide open despite the cold. That's just as good as the truth. That's just as good as the truth, said my father. You certainly never did anything with the life that you were given. Take care, Don, said Sal. He turned to me. You too, Jack. My name isn't Jack, I said, though I wanted to say much more. I wanted to ask so many questions, but they would not come out of my lips. I could only insist that my name wasn't Jack, though a part of me wondered if it was. Sal turned around and he walked out of our house, closing the door behind him, cutting off my view of the creeping red sunrise. It took some time and a great deal of trouble before I understood that my family was not merely pretending that Uncle Sal had never existed to them. He hadn't. Nor did I find any physical evidence of his existence, despite digging through long-forgotten photograph in the attic and even going so far as to bicycle to the 30 miles to the house that he had bought with my aunt, only to be told by the current owner that she had lived there for the past 20 years and did not know anybody by the name of Sal. At first, I was desperate to convince people that Uncle Sal had, in fact, existed, but all I got from my efforts were looks ranging from annoyance to concern, and more than once, the suggestion that maybe it was time to talk to somebody about all this, somebody with a nice couch that I could stretch out on, who would know things about how my mind worked that I myself didn't know. And so after a while, I decided that there were no points in trying to convince anyone of what I knew to be the truth. It has been easy enough, though, through the years to forget about something or somebody who was universally agreed to have existed, and even easier, I found, to forget about somebody who nobody else remembers ever existing. At most, Uncle Sal would come to my mind in a flash, and I would say, look over at that old chair in the corner of the dining room where he used to sit and glower during our family events. Or sometimes I'd catch some awful sound that he made that would make me shiver, a fork scrape across a ceramic plate, for example. And I would think of him and his crack into reality. I remember once asking my high school science teacher, whom I admired a great deal, why certain sounds like nails on a chalkboard affected us the way that they did. That's an excellent question, said Mr. Hartley. I wouldn't pretend to have the answer, but I can offer a hypothesis. Most likely, there was a time in our evolutionary history when reacting with visceral revulsion to a sound, it afforded us a great deal of chance of survival. A great deal of our chance of survival, that is. You see, say these noises sounded similar to the call of some ancient predator that stalked us at night. Having an extra sensitivity to these sorts of sounds, well, that would help us alert to dangerous presences that meant us harm. On the other hand, this theory is a little too neat. It's entirely possible, but that there is no good reason at all that one day our ancestors just randomly developed this trait, and since it didn't kill them, it stuck around, and other more useful traits worked towards our survival. So nobody really knows, I asked. Mr. Hartley smiled. I'll confess that I'm not an expert on the subject. I'll tell you what, though, Jim. If you want to research this topic, well, hand in a report on it, and I'll give you extra credit. Not that you need it at all, but hey, I truly believe that learning something about the world we live in is its own reward. And frankly, I'm hoping that you could take up the challenge so that I might learn something too. I accepted this assignment and I researched the topic. At the time, the year 2000, the most authoritative study was done in 1986, when scientists reproduced the sound with a forked garden tool on a chalkboard and then separated out the different frequencies contained in it. They found that it was the middle range of pitches that caused feelings of revulsion in the subjects. Now, they concluded, as Mr. Hartley had, that our response to these sounds was likely due to an offending pitches resembling the call of some predator early on in our evolution, such as possibly a certain type of monkey. Now, armed with a perfectly rational explanation for why we were repulsed by these sounds, I forgot about Uncle Sal entirely for several years. The world was a place that made sense. It wasn't some bizarre experimental illusion created by cold, alien things lurking behind a sheet of opaque paper. I was quite sure of that. Now we will skip ahead 20 years through the building of a life that has been, on the whole, quiet, happy, and fulfilling, to yesterday afternoon. I returned to my nice house on the outskirts of a small coastal town where I'd been teaching at a small, well-endowed university. My wife, Alicia, was in her studio working on a painting. The children, I remembered, were on a play date with friends that would stretch into evening. It was a perfect opportunity, I thought, for love making. "Hey, sweetie," I said, sticking my head into the studio. "You up for taking a little break? Maybe have a glass of wine with me?" Alicia peeked around the canvas. She had red streaks of paint across her forehead, which turned me on. "Sure," she said, smiling sweetly. "Let me go wash up." "No," I said, "I like it better this way." My wife laughed, and we went down to the kitchen together to select a bottle of wine. Something white," she said. "I've seen enough red for today. This piece I'm working on now, it may be the one that does me in." "Sounds dramatic," I said, picking out a Pinot Grigio and holding up the bottle for approval. Alicia nodded. "When did I get to see it anyway?" I asked, uncorking the bottle. "I think it's formed enough now to look something like a swirling mess of placenta, so whenever you like." I poured out 2 glasses full and handed one to Alicia. "Hey," she said, before I forgot, "who's Uncle Sal?" I froze with a glass of wine inches from my lips. "Who?" "Some guy claiming to be your uncle. Said he's been trying to reach you all day, so he tried my number. He had a message for you that I wrote down. How come you never told me you have an uncle?" I became unstuck and swallowed down half of the contents of my glass. "I don't," I said, thinking about the series of unanswered calls I had received that day from an unknown caller. Must have been a wrong number. "Ah," said Alicia. "He did say that the message was for Jack. But some people use that as a nickname for James, so I thought that's all it was. The message was quite strange, too. I can't remember what it said for some reason. I just remember that it was strange. It's up in the studio." I shivered. Might as well just toss it in the trash since it's not for me. I never had an Uncle Sal or never even knew anybody by the name of Sal. It's just a wrong number. "Got it," said Alicia. "Shall we head upstairs and do the deed?" I had grown cold inside and I wanted desperately to warm up. "We should," I said, topping off my glass. Alicia led the way upstairs, and I followed from behind, looking at the butt that I knew so well, which was still full of untold wonders for me. But the warm feelings didn't come, and instead I was greeted by the sudden and hideous vision of my father's naked, hairy ass as I had seen it all those years ago. I drained my glass mid-step, only successfully landing half of its contents in my mouth. The rest dribbled down my chin. We reached the second floor and made our way to the bedroom, but halfway there, Alicia stopped in front of her studio. "Want to see it?" she asked. "The painting?" "Yes," I said. I think that by then I could already hear the sound. I could feel it reaching into my ears and sliding into my body. Alicia led me into the studio around the front of the painting. There on the canvas was a chaotic bunch of dark colors smeared around and on top of each other, and on top of it all, in blood-red paint, some words that read, "You're on the road to nowhere." Bling! I dropped my wine glass to the floor as Alicia above the increasing noise. "That was the message," she said, "from Uncle Sal." I turned to face her in uncomprehending terror as the noise increased in intensity, from mere fingernails scraping against a chalkboard to dark and heavy claws tearing down through reality itself. Then a crack formed, and Alicia, my love, split down the middle, spilling out a cold blue and screaming the sound. I began jerking violently around, knocking out the canvas, and grew desperate to escape. I obeyed the most powerful, most primitive urge that I had ever experienced, and I ran out of the room, and I ran down the hall. I fell down the stairs, banging body parts against the treads and the balusters, but I was so full of panic to feel any physical pain. Now I made it to the front door and outside into the purple twilight, and I kept running to where my car was parked. I jumped inside and I started driving down the road. I drove for many miles, the pain now fully registering throughout my body, and finally pulling into a hotel parking lot. My intention was to drink myself into oblivion and pass out alone in a cheap room, putting all that business of processing what had just had happened until there was some time to distance myself to look at it from afar. But after a few drinks, my nerves had steadied enough, and I was happy to convince myself that it had just been a strange hallucination. All of it. From Uncle Sal to the splitting apart of my wife. She was probably home now, I figured, alone with the kids, beginning to grow irritated that I wasn't there yet. The bartender lumbered over to refill my drink. He looked strangely familiar. I held up a finger and said, "Give me a second. I'm not sure if I want another yet." I pulled out my phone and I went to call Alicia, but I couldn't find her name in my contacts. I bit my lip and I dialed her number manually. The line rang and rang. "Well," said the bartender, "what's it gonna be, Jack?" I terminated the call, then pulled out my wallet and placed a $50 bill on the bar top. "Keep the change," I said, standing up. "And my name's not Jack, it never was. Don't you fucking forget it." Then I walked out into the cold night. I like that one. Let me see if anyone's up in here. I like that one. JJ, what's going on? The Twilight Zone ripoff. I should know. Hey, there's more videos on my other channel. Oh yeah, what's up? Looking up and the sky was open. Word. And it's more video. Yeah. And I fuck with Twilight Zone. Hard body too. Yeah, disappearing from reality and existence. Trying to think if I could even recall the name of that episode that actually did that. That's real. You know? It's a good one though. I like the way it was told. What's going on with you though? I'm actually a bit sleepy, so I might have stuttered and slipped up and had a little bit of blurry vision over a couple parts. Let me take a quick little bathroom intermission, and we'll get to part two. Matter of fact, let's let the ambient horror music just resonate while I take a bathroom break, and then we're gonna get to the second and final installation of tonight, which is called "There's a Day Hidden Between the Days," which also sounds just as metaphysical and sci-fi as the last one. So I'll be right back. My bathroom break wouldn't take for some reason. I don't know. It's all good. I am trying so hard to fight off. I'm going to say it in scary story reading voice. I'm trying so hard to fight off the desire to eat something. I have a chicken patty in the refrigerator. I could just heat it up real quick. But I want to give myself a good 3 hours prior to bed to distance myself from any type of nourishment that will aid in a big belly. All right. Back at it. Shout out to good advice and the wonderful people that give it. You know what I'm saying? So we're about to get busy to the final installation of the day, or of the scary, creepy morning. There's a day hidden between the days, posted by odd_directions. Let's go. I've stumbled upon something It's something that concerns everyone, something so disturbing that falling asleep will forever remain a terrifying ordeal to anyone who knows about it. It's all around us, an omnipresence of horror, and yet it's nowhere to be seen. I'm not here to explain it. I'll leave that to someone more suited for the task. I'm only here as an involuntary witness. My awakening, which is what I've come to call it, it happened yesterday. I was homesick in my small New York apartment. I was on the couch in my underwear watching the news, drowning in tissues and eating cereal, even though it was dinner time. It was a typical sick day for a bachelor in his 30s that is completely uninteresting. That's partly why this is so difficult to explain. There weren't any warning signs, not even an uneasy feeling. I went to bed early, expecting the next day to be a repetition of the day that had passed, and I was lulled to sleep by the ambient sound of the New York traffic outside my window. Startled, I woke up at the unusual sound of silence. My heart was beating rapidly as if I had already noticed that something was wrong. It was a bluish electric light shone through my window like a lightning bolt had been frozen in time outside. I looked at the alarm clock on my nightstand. It was as if it was like midnight, but I soon realized that the clock had stopped. I felt a bit feverish, but I was clear-headed enough to tell the difference between a dream and reality. The light from outside, combined with the eerie silence, it confused me. I got out of bed with a groan. First, I sat on the ledge and I tried to collect my thoughts, and then I walked up to the window to see where the light had come from. I expected a huge spotlight pointed at my window, but that wasn't it. The strange voltaic light covered the entire city, as far as I could see anyway. But even though the light was everywhere, it didn't seem to come from anywhere. Down on the street, I saw that every car had stopped and been abandoned, with their doors still open. Did I miss an emergency alert? I couldn't fathom what was going on. Two people, a man and a woman, stood on the sidewalk. I was relieved to see them, but after watching them for a while, I realized that they weren't doing anything. They were just standing there like mannequins. I turned on the TV to see if there was any news about what was going on. They were sending live, which was expected given that the news channel was broadcasting all the time, but the news anchor wasn't saying anything. She stared into the camera without blinking a single time. The blue-white light from the outside illuminated the right side of her face. From the left, something strange entered the frame. It looked like a tentacle, but it didn't have any texture. It was pitch black. It slowly moved toward the woman's head. Its movements were fluid, almost as if it wasn't affected by gravity. Even though I knew that the woman was sitting in a studio several miles away, it still felt uncomfortable being stared down by her while this thing is approaching her from the side. I flinched, and then the tentacle, effortlessly, without causing any physical damage, entered the side of her head. It just phased through it. A shadow from something large nearby over her, and then she let out a senseless scream of horror. I immediately turned the television off, almost dropping the remote. The fuck was that? My mind was in a disarray. I looked out the window again. The people were still standing there, motionless. I noticed a few more people inside the cars. The traffic lights, they had stopped, just like my clock did. It was as if everything had been frozen in place. So I stepped away from the window, and a shadow had appeared on the ground. I carefully peeked outside to see what cast it, and it slowly moved into view. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was huge, squid-like being floating above the ground. I recognized its tentacles from what I'd seen on the television. It approached the people standing on the sidewalk and slid two of its tentacles into their heads. They didn't seem to notice anything of what was going on. This time there wasn't any screaming. The couple just took off all their clothes and walked away, as if they were controlled by the floating being that was above them. I tried to see where it was taking them, but they walked out of view. Next, another black squid appeared. It phased through a building, just as if it didn't exist on the same plane of existence as ordinary matter. Now, this made me feel unsafe. It meant that there was no way to keep them outside. They could just float into my apartment at any moment. I sat down with my back against the wall. My thoughts touched upon every possibility I could think of, everything from a sudden onset of insanity to an alien invasion. I crawled into my bathroom and I laid down on the tub. It wasn't safer there, of course. It just felt that way. I couldn't tell for how long that I stayed there, but it must have been at least half a day. And after that, in a blink of an eye, the strange light shining into my apartment had disappeared into the sounds of the city and returned. So I picked up my phone and I looked at the display until it finally showed 1 minute past midnight. Tired, I climbed up from the tub and I looked out the window. Everything seemed to be back to normal. The cars drove like normal. No one had noticed the mysterious 12 hours that we had just experienced, except The couple had been led away by those beings that weren't there anymore. They never returned. As you could probably understand, it felt as if my entire world had fallen apart. I quickly put on a pair of sweatpants together with my stained robe and I ran outside. People stared at me condescendingly as soon as I exited the building, but I didn't care. I needed some answers. Someone must have seen the couple vanish from the sidewalk, I thought. I ran up to a cab and I approached the driver. "Excuse me," I yelled into it, though I tried to speak to a normal volume. "I live next door and The driver looked at me as if I was a meth addict, and I didn't blame him. "Did you see the couple that stood right there?" I pointed at the spot where they had been standing. "I saw them from the window, but..." "I didn't see any couple," the man said. "Are you sure? Because, dude," he said, "I've been staring in that direction since I parked here and I didn't see any couple." "But they took off their clothes," I said. "How could you have missed that? Look, the clothes are right there." I picked them up from the ground and I showed him. "Hey, dude, don't bring that trash into my car." "But they were right there," I yelled. "Hey, you there?" I turned to a lady waiting for the bus on the other side of the street. "Did you see the couple standing over there?" The woman shook her head dismissively. "Freaking crackhead," I heard the driver whisper before he drove away from me. I felt stupid even though I was sure that I was right. The clothes on the ground, they proved it. I saw that couple take them off. If that was a hallucination, I thought, the clothes would not be here now. I returned to my apartment and I turned on the television again. The news anchor reported on the news as usual, oblivious of the tentacle in her head that made her scream earlier. I sat down on my bed and I tried to make sense of what had happened, but I was too tired to think. Now, I hadn't slept for an entire day worth of time, and yet no time had passed at all. The only thought I managed to produce before I nodded off was that I had been stuck in some kind of surreal crossroads between this day and the day before. I had no idea if that was a proper way to describe it. It was merely how it felt. And after I woke up in the middle of the day, my experience from midnight, it lingered in my mind. I managed to think about it a bit more clearly now that I had slept, although I still couldn't make heads or tails of it. It was just as if the entire world had been put on pause during those hours, allowing those horrible creatures to do whatever they liked to us. I left my apartment to get some air. The woman's dress was still laying on the street, blowing across the sidewalk with the wind. Did anyone miss her, or had she disappeared from everyone's mind just as she had disappeared from the world? Questions like this bounced around in my head. I stopped at the street corner and I looked up at the sun that squinted my eyes. This was something more than even the most far-out theory I could imagine, such as an alien invasion. It concerned reality itself. How else could the entire sky have turned into this strange electric blue? Now, the normal sky felt off. The normal sky now, it felt off. It didn't look any different, but after having seen what I saw earlier, I just couldn't shake the feeling that it was nothing more than a picture projected on a vast screen. It left me with a claustrophobic feeling of being trapped between the walls of a house without an outside. It made me dizzy. I couldn't stay outside because it just didn't feel like outside anymore, so I ran home again. Later, as the watch on my wall slowly approached midnight, I considered taking some sleeping pills. Now, I didn't want to wake up in the same strange in-between day as before. In the end, however, I decided against it. I needed to know if it would happen again or if it had just been, a one-time thing. So I sat at my kitchen table, anxiously waiting for the final hour of the day to strike. The blue light flooded my apartment the same instant the watch on the wall stopped ticking. It wasn't over. Just moments later, one of the enormous floating squids passed through my living room. I froze in my place as I watched it exit through the wall on the other side of the room. This can't be happening. This can't be happening. This can't be happening. I wanted to escape, to run away, but there was nowhere to go. What if they saw that I had broken free from the state of trance that everyone else seemed to be in? Everyone else. I sneaked over to my computer and I watched a live broadcast on the BBC. Same thing was happening there. A man had stopped moving in the middle of an interview, but was still talking. It wasn't English, though, but it was some kind of gibberish. Tower Bridge was visible behind him, and several creatures soared in the air around it. Just to make sure that it was truly a global phenomenon, I went to YouTube and I clicked my way into a live stream of the Shibuya crossing in Tokyo. All the cars had stopped, and the black cabs reflected the buzzing blue sky. The people either stood perfectly still or walked around in strange patterns. One of them laughed hysterically. A noise came from upstairs. I quickly closed the laptop, afraid that someone might have heard me. It sounded like a struggle. A frail old lady lived in the apartment above, and I couldn't imagine her being capable of making those sounds. Worrying that she might be in trouble, and also because I wanted some answers, I decided to sneak up to her floor and see what was going on. The hallway outside my front door was silent and vaguely illuminated by the strange light from the outside. Ascending from the stairs, the atmosphere got more and more electric, so I slowly approached my neighbor's door and I put my ear to it. Her apartment was quiet now. I looked through the letter slot, and at first I didn't see anything out of the ordinary, but then a flickering shadow on the floor caught my attention. I stood outside the door for a few moments, hesitating, before I decided to try and open it. Perhaps my neighbor was just awake like me, I thought as I slowly turned the doorknob. Ruth? I whispered. I didn't see her, just a strange flickering shadow on top of the Persian carpet. Then I looked up at the ceiling. Ruth, completely undressed, was spinning around at a ludicrous speed in the middle of the air. For a few seconds, I just stood there and I looked at her in disbelief, but then, which was common for her when she would walk down the hallways with her walker, she urinated. The entire room was sprayed with her piss, and some of it landed on my face. I quickly withdrew from her, and I ran back to my room where I made sure to clean myself off. I looked out the window. Was I truly the only one awake, able to see what was going on? I picked up my phone and I tried to make a phone call to a friend. I didn't expect it to work, but after about 5 ringtones, he picked up. I was overwhelmed with relief. Yes, he said. Hey man, it's me, I said, but was interrupted. Yes, he repeated. Are you seeing what's going on? I mean, it's like the entire world has turned into... I'm a forester, not a historian. Excuse me, I said, feeling my panic coming back. Following the direction of the screaming, you'll find the big black moose's head at the entrance of the tunnel. He was clearly not himself. Come on, man, snap out of it, I said, holding back my tears. Please return me to my original form, please. He sounded less robotic now. Did I somehow wake him up? You there, man? I yelled. Stay with me, okay? The muscles of my limbs are stretched to their limits. He was sobbing now, whispering the words into his phone. Are you hurt, man? I asked. Did one of those creatures... As I am dying, my internal organs shift inside. He was crying now. Shit, man. I didn't know what more to say. Listen, don't go anywhere. I looked around for my car keys. I'm coming to... I can feel them shifting in my flesh, and the sheer mass of it is so great that it shakes the ground as I stagger and tremble to my feet. I listened to him while I grabbed my car keys from the cabinet in the living room. If only there was a way that I could stop the things in front of me. What? I said, what's in front of you? The smell of blood surrounds me. He kept talking as if he didn't hear me. Blood and death, it's everywhere. But bodies of the living are coagulated and blood gushes from their wounds. Are you at your place? Yes? The dullness in his voice was back. Stay with me, man. I said, I'm a forester, not a historian. What does that mean? I yelled. I'm coming. The only response that I got to that was a petrifying scream, and then the phone call ended abruptly. Outside, I immediately noticed a lack of weather. There weren't any winds, and the temperature was the same as inside. The pigeons on the sidewalk, they had stopped just as if someone had put them on pause, and a little boy stood in the street corner making jazz hands over and over and over again while blood dripping from his nose. Now, I didn't know how to blend in since everyone was acting erratically, so I didn't even try. I just ran to my car, I put the keys in, and I started the engine. But before I could drive away, the little boy jumped in front of the car, still making jazz hands, and blocked my way. More people gathered around the car, mumbling nonsensical words. I climbed on top of my car through the sunroof. An airplane was frozen in the middle of the sky, and one of the horrifying creatures was leading one of the passengers outside with its tentacles. I had nowhere to go. The people, they weren't attacking me, but they made sure that I could not escape from where I was. One of the creatures came floating by, casting its enormous shadow on the street. Did they know about me? I stood on my car's roof, yelling at the people to wake up until my voice failed me. Why aren't you listening to me? You're crazy, someone yelled back. That's why you're in my room, a little girl yelled. Get the fuck out, she laughed. Also, this is why I'm still here doing this shit. But you're not saying anything, an old man yelled at me. I sat down and put my face in my hands, giving up my attempts at reaching out to the people. Now it's hard to say, it's hard to say exactly how much time had passed while I sat on the roof of my car like this, but I eventually stood up again, ready to jump over the crowd. One of the creatures ominously appeared from beneath the ground, just a few hundred meters away from me. It floated toward me, reaching for me with its enormous tentacles. Although it was moving relatively slow, I would have never been able to run away from it on foot. Its ability to phase through anything, that made that impossible. The closer it came, the more electricity filled the air. My hair stood on end, positive charges rising through me. I climbed into my car again, turned on the engine again, and acting out of pure desperation, I put it into reverse gear and I hit the pedal as hard as I could. The crowd dispersed quickly, but I still felt a small bump under my tires. I didn't have any time to think what was going on, what I was going to let the beast penetrate my brain with one of its hideous tentacles. So I swung the car around and zigzagged between the cars in front of me until I reached a relatively empty pedestrian street where I hit the gas as hard as I could. Two of the creatures phased through the buildings next to me, and several more descended toward me from the sky. I drove for a long time, hopelessly trying to escape the monsters that relentlessly chased after me. I only stopped once to push a stroller off the sidewalk I was driving on. The baby inside it was wailing, but no sound came from its mouth. I drove past individuals partaking in the most bizarre behaviors that I ever seen in my entire life. The least weird being a young woman in a business suit having sex with an old taxi driver on the hood of his car. From there, it only got worse. A middle-aged man was binge-eating all the fecal matter that he could find inside a dog park. A 200-pound man was standing on his head with an eerie grin on his face. A teenage girl was holding her own eye, still connected to her skull, in her hand, watching herself sing a lullaby. Manhattan, as well as the rest of the world, had turned into a living nightmare under the oppressive presence of the black giant squids. I thought about the people around me and everyone else as well. Tomorrow, are they going to remember anything? To them, it would just be as if it had never happened at all, but it did happen. But that guy, he really did fill his mouth with dog turds, and that lady, she really did have sex with that old man. For how long has this been going on? I had no answers to my questions, just more questions. Have I been acting like this between the days as well, perhaps for my entire life? The thought of it made my stomach turn. I took a sharp turn into Park Row, aiming for the Brooklyn Bridge. Now, when I got there, I stopped in the middle of it. Several creatures approached me from both ends. There was nowhere for me to go. The East River reflected the galvanizing sky and turned into a shining white silver. I walked over to the edge and I grabbed the railing with both hands. For the first time in my life, I contemplated ending it all. A little girl came up to me. For a moment, I thought that she would try to comfort me, but all she said was, "As a symbol of Forok, they used to put me on my knees before I was old enough to drink wine so that I could be taught the true form of Forok." Listening to her nonsense, I began climbing the railing. "The ancient gods have made it so that the world is blind to their power." She didn't take any breaths while talking. It's like the words just screamed out of her little drooling mouth, completely unhindered. "These gods are both power-hungry and charming. Although these malevolent beings are relentless in their goal to rule everything, none are the true monarch of a ravaged world. They are insidious creatures that impose their will on the living and shape their nature, acting as constant tempters in their perceived petty struggles. Please hit the light. Thank you. This is the true danger of these gods. They work, they speak, they spy, they manipulate, they donate." She stopped mid-sentence and returned to the car that she had gotten out of. Everyone seemed to be returning to their original positions, spitting out whatever they had put in their mouths and adjusting their clothes. The creatures were almost upon me now, but then, in an instant, the midnight sky came back and the airplanes in the sky, they shot forward without any need to accelerate, just as if they hadn't stopped at all. All the creatures vanished just before their tentacles reached me. I climbed down on the sidewalk again and I burst into tears. The little girl looked at me from the car, just as if she had never seen me before in her life. Now my friend who lived near Fort Greene Park, he opened his door, surprised to see my exhausted face at this late hour. There were no indications of a struggle. He was perfectly fine. I urged him to check his phone. Confused, he picked it up. Can you see if you received a phone call from me in the past few hours or so? I said, hoping that there'd be some evidence. No, there's nothing. Darn it, I said. I was hoping. Hey, what's going on with you? He said with sympathy in his eyes. Are you all right? I'm okay. It's just that, well, I don't even know where to begin, to be honest. Why don't you try from the start, he said, and paused the game he had been playing on his Xbox. I told him everything, albeit a bit incoherently. Are you on drugs? He said. That's the craziest thing I ever heard, and trust me, I heard a lot of crazy shit. I didn't expect you to believe me, I said. But during this day between the days, I really did call you when you picked up. I really thought I got through to you. You said something about something about not being a historian, but a forester. Wait, whoa, my friend said, suddenly pale. What did you just say? His lower lip trembled with a fear that I hadn't seen in his eyes before. Did you just say? You kept repeating it. I'm a forester, not a historian, I said. I just now, when I was playing this video game, I had this deja vu to a dream that I must have forgotten from a long time ago. I was talking to someone and my body, it twisted in some macabre way. It was freaky. There was blood everywhere, and I remember saying those exact words. I'm a forester, not a historian. It wasn't a dream, man, I said. It was me. You were talking to me on the phone, and you said those words. He walked over to the window. I don't see anything out of the ordinary, he said. This isn't something that you just see by looking through your window, I said. It's completely hidden from the world. You only experience day and night. Now, what happens in between? I sat down on my friend's sofa and I turned on the news. They were reporting from a crime scene. Wait, that's outside my place, I said. What's going on? There was a picture of me on the screen, wanted for a hit and run. The victim was a little boy. It was the kid making jazz hands. They displayed a city map showing the crash location and a red line going from my place to the middle of the Brooklyn Bridge. Several police cars were involved in the chase, the reporter said, but lost track of the subject after he exited his car on the bridge. My friend walked over to me. I quickly turned off the TV before he saw my face on it. What was that? He said. Nothing, I said. Just some car accident near my place. But it wasn't nothing. It was them, the creatures, trying to manipulate everyone into doing their bidding. I'm hiding at a McDonald's right now, and I have nowhere to go. Chased both during the days and in between them. Nowhere to go except maybe another edge to jump off from. Whoa. I digs that one. I digs that one right there. I like that one. Sky open. Elm City, what up? Sounds like an awesome trip. Why didn't he record? So what do y'all think? Do you think he literally was tripping and he just killed a kid on some dumb stuff? Or do you think he really had a crazy medical physical in between days experience? And it must have been. Yeah. I think they proved that the situation was real when he said that he told his friend what his friend had said, and his friend said he remembered that from a dream. So yeah, they actually kind of validated that it was indeed an in-between day and night situation going on. You know what I'm saying? At first I was thinking maybe they left it up to the imagination, but now they kind of put like a stamp, a time stamp, if you will, or a placement that says, yeah, that shit really happened. But yeah, I dig that story. I like them shits to have them fucked up endings. He's about to get locked up, or he might just go off the bridge, end it. That's my shit. It'll make a good short story, short horror film. Yeah, absolutely. Why didn't he record any of this? That would have been irrefutable proof. Exactly. I don't know though, because he said he called his man up, and there was no call record. So maybe the rules of this in between thing is you can't do any use technology to capture the moment or something. I don't know. Which one y'all like better? I kind of dig the second one a little better than the first one. Well, yeah, considerably better than the first one. First one was alright, but I dig that second one. Yeah, with that said, y'all, thanks for coming through. I'm gonna end this. Like I said, I have a membership thing now. I don't know exactly what I'm gonna do with the membership thing, but I am gonna incorporate these short story readings to some capacity, be it live readings or pre-recordeds. Somehow I'm gonna do it. The leading charge of thought that I'm having about doing this thing is on some late night type stuff like this, after hours or whatever. I read this live to anybody, member or not. But then when it's done, I have it where only the members could catch the repeat. You know what I'm saying? But I'm not going to do that right now, just because you know what I'm saying, the numbers gotta go in that north direction. So, you know, as things increase and I feel like I can afford to just put joints on private, so to speak, or to put things into a members only world, basically I'm gonna put the shit in between the days. That's what members only is for me. You know what I'm saying? If you want to go in between the day and night, you must become a member, starting at about $2. Then I got the $5, then the $10. But I suggest just get the $2 right now, because I got to make sure I have stuff that's worth the money. And as I do that, I will then urge people to get the higher packages when there are higher packages to be gotten. So, on that note, my good people, thanks for coming through. Get some sleep if you can.